Coaches, hey, welcome to the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Four. Appreciate you being here. We are interviewing Coach Kenny Simpson. Coach Kenny Simpson, we're interviewing him about being a head football coach and about the book he wrote. It's a great book. We're going to get into all that. We got 10 questions for Coach Simpson about being a head football coach, and I think you'll really enjoy this interview with Coach Simpson. We'll give you a lot of different things to think about in regards to being a head football coach. It was really fun spending some time interviewing him, getting to know him a little more. Coach Simpson's book is called Find a Way, What I Wish I'd Known When I Became a Head Football Coach. It's available on my website, 8laces.org, EIGHTLACES.org. As a PDF, comes sent to you right away in your email. It's also available in a hard copy on Amazon, where a lot of us, buy books. But check out Coach Simpson. You can follow him at FB Coach Simpson on Twitter. And we're going to get into that book in just a moment. I wanted to tell you about a quick new resource I have. I get a lot of questions about special teams. And so I put together on my website, again, 8laces.org, a new resource there, folks. It's $4.99. It's called the Kick Return Game Clinic PowerPoint. Again, Kick Return Game Clinic PowerPoint. It's my clinic talk at Glazier on the kick return game, punts and kick returns. Comes with 60 slides, and we talk about everything from 4 things to consider regarding kickoff team personnel, 4 points about the ball placement, creating a land chart, 7 considerations of the kickoff scheme, 4 considerations versus onside kick, 5 things you can't consider until actual game day. Folks, I think I've been a very detail-oriented person, and I think it's a lot of things you might not consider about kick and punt return, okay? For instance, 6 considerations for a fake punt, 6 points about the ball placement for the punt team, 8 things to consider regarding punt team personnel, 7 considerations of the punt scheme. I have a bunch of kick return samples in here. We have a fake kick return sample in here, 5 sample punt returns. So again, $4.99. You can find it on my website, 8laces.org, EIGHTLACES.org. Click on special teams, then it's the first thing. Click on Kick Return Game Clinic PowerPoint. Now, let's get into our intro.
You are listening to the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Four, a place for all coaches to call home. The Coach's Locker podcast is a part of the Football Coaching Podcast Network. Please visit footballcoachingpodcast.com to hear and see our entire lineup of top football coaches coming to you every single podcast with valuable information to help you and your program. The Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Four exists to help prepare coaches to be hired for the job of their dreams and to provide coaches with dynamite resources to become even more successful in their field. You can reach me on Twitter at Coach4, that's at COACHFORE, and my podcast home is at 8laces.org/podcast. That's 8laces, EIGHTLACES.org/podcast. Welcome to the Coach's Locker podcast with Chris Four. Now, let's get after it. Hands up, forget about the past, 'cause you and I's everything I ever asked for. Top down round the West Coast.
All right, as I said there on the intro, we are with Coach Kenny Simpson here. Coach Simpson, thank you for joining me on our podcast. Good morning.
Hey man, I'm grateful to be here, and thanks for what you're doing to help grow football across the country.
So you can follow Coach Simpson on Twitter. It's at FB Coach Simpson. That's SIMPSON. Again, at FB, as in football, FB Coach Simpson. Coach Kenny Simpson out in Arkansas. We're going to do something here, Coach. I called the kickoff to tip off in the first pitch. Kind of allow our readers to get to know you just a little bit here before we dive into some great information about being a head football coach. Coach, what's the first team you played on, and what do you remember from that team?
Ooh, Man, that's a good one. You go all the way back to youth. I was a military kid, and so we moved everywhere. But probably the first one I can remember, I actually grew up playing soccer in the great state of Arizona at about the age of 4 or 5 years old. And I remember I got a concussion playing soccer at that young an age. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. I know my worst concussion, I think I was either 8 or 9 years old playing baseball. I was catching and took my my helmet off to get a foul ball or something. The kid threw a friggin' bat, hit me right in the back of the head, knocked me flat out. That's the worst concussion I ever had. Coach,
yeah, ironically, I've broken my arm and had a couple other issues, but none were through football. They were always through other sports. Kind of a little bit different.
Very interesting how that happens. Coach, what's the last team you played on, and what do you remember from that team?
Probably my senior year, I got to play football in Arizona. We moved all over, so it's kind of odd. Started in Arizona, moved everywhere, and came back. I remember we started out, I believe, 6-0, and were ranked pretty high. Ended up not finishing the way we wanted to, but I think it was the best team that school had. They've actually changed names now to Push Ridge Christian, a little 2A school in Tucson, Arizona. It was a great place to be, and had a lot of good memories. I only got to spend one semester there just due to my dad being in the Air Force, but really, really enjoyed the guys.
Coach, we've threw the ball against Push Ridge back. It's been 12, 13 years ago. I was they came out to a tournament every year down here at Ontario Christian, and some real good coaches. I remember that, and it seemed like a real quality program. Small world. Yeah,
it is a small world, and
you moved around a lot, Coach. I remember reading that part in your book. I think you went to 3 different high schools in 4 years.
I did. Three different high schools. Got to play some football across the country and really experience lots of different cultures and lots of different flavors of football, which really, I think, helped me down the road.
Yeah. What states did you live in during high school?
Well, during high school, I lived in Florida, right at Mount Dora. It's now called Mount Dora Christian Academy. It was Mount Dora Bible back then, but I actually grew up playing youth football in that area. Moved to Arkansas, which is where I reside now, but played 1 year at Greenwood, and then played 1 year in Tucson, Arizona. So 3 different states all across the country, very different football, but some great coaches.
Yeah, that's cool. Coach, who's been your main mentor in the coaching profession or their certain profession? Who do you look to as a mentor of sorts?
I've got 2 or 3 guys that I usually will call if I have issues. One is Coach Barker, Brett Barker. He's actually in Texas now, but he was in Alabama. He's the athletic director down in the school, big school district down there now. But he's a guy I look towards, and really I've reached out to several other guys. I talked with Tommy Shoemaker over at Central Arkansas Christian, great guy. I think he's doing things the right way, and he's a guy I aspire to be like as far as how he handles his kids. But actually, probably the person who's done the best job keeping me in check has been my wife. She's been really good to kind of set me straight when I needed it, and encourage me when I needed that too.
Yeah, spouses play a key role. Coach, we'll get into this a little bit. I'm going to skip this question. The 4th question here is the worst mistake you ever made as a coach, but you wrote a whole chapter about that in your book. We're going to hit on that a little later, yeah. Coach, how about your greatest accomplishment as a coach? I think you hit on this in the book we'll talk about as well, but what do you believe was your greatest accomplishment as a coach?
Man, I would hope it doesn't have anything to do with wins and losses. I think to me, it's been watching these young men grow up, and there's story after story I could tell of how these guys have come from young men and to now they're full-grown men, and some of them are doctors, and some of them are successful in other areas. Some of them are great family men, and I would hope that that's my accomplishment, is that they still look to me as somebody they can come to for advice, and they still look to me maybe in that role. To me, I think that's more of a long-lasting accomplishment.
Absolutely. Coach, what's your favorite vacation spot?
Man, I tell you what, I'm kind of odd. I've got a bunch of children, and most dads hate Disney World, but I'm actually a big, big fan of Orlando. I grew up around that area, and I love taking my kids back there and just watching their faces. They get to experience Disney or Universal or any of those areas.
That's an expensive vacation spot there, Coach.
It's not cheap. Yeah, it's not cheap.
Yeah. Coach, what's your favorite thing to do outside of coaching ball and spending time with your family? What's your favorite thing to do? Do you have any hobbies you enjoy?
I do. I enjoy reading, but probably the one that's most different is I like to travel. I've been blessed with going on several. I lead several school trips overseas, so we've traveled pretty much all over Europe. My wife and I like to travel a lot. I like to cruise. I just like to see different places and be with different people, and put your phone down and just enjoy the moment and see some pretty awesome places.
Talk to me a little bit about those school trips. Are those trips with like football teams you do, or schools, or what are those trips about?
It's really any student in our school. I open it up to them. They've got to be in high school and have some, good recommendations for me to take them out of the country. But we've taken groups of the size of 40 all the way down to the size of 8 or so, whoever's interested in going. And it's been neat. I've been able to take my own children with me and my spouse with me to see Paris and to see Rome. And we've done a couple domestics in New York City and those type of deals. It's a pretty cool deal to see not only my experience there, but to see high school kids see something for the first time.
Yeah, and I see you're doing. I've seen on Twitter, you and your wife, are you guys leading a cruise through Fellowship of Christian Athletes? Or are you part of that?
Yeah, I'm part of it. I think that we kind of got the idea of. I go to a lot of coaching clinics, and so we wanted to do something different that was more encouraging to coaches taking their family. And my mom is a travel agent and brought up the fact that cruises are a pretty inexpensive way to have an all-inclusive deal. So I kind of started brainstorming on that, and then I reached out to FCA because we wanted to make it about the family, and I'm not the person to lead coaches' wives. I figure FCA, that's more up their realm.
Yeah.
So they send Eric Aiken comes with me and his spouse. His wife does a great job leading the ladies, and then the coaches, we do some professional development on the days you're at sea. And then it's also a great time to just be around other coaches in a relaxed atmosphere and be around your family.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw you put out like a little comparison on the cost of that versus the cost of, going off to a clinic. And it was real impressive to see it broken down that way, because you don't think about a lot of costs associated with a clinic, but I thought, man, that would be a great thing to do. I think that's a great idea. Again, follow Coach Simpson at FB Coach Simpson. That's FB for football, FB Coach Simpson. Make sure to follow him if you don't already, and maybe learn some about some trips he'll be doing like that in the future. So, Coach, you just released a brand new book, and that's available, guys, on Amazon. You can get that shipped out to you via Amazon, where a lot of us buy books. We also have it. Coach has made it available on my website, 8laces.org, as an instant download. Coach, great book idea. Guys, it's called Find a Way, What I Wish I'd Known When I Became a Head Football Coach. And when I first saw this on Twitter, I thought, man, that is a great idea, great book idea. Coach, what made you think of putting this resource together?
Well, man, I've, like probably most coaches that may be listening, I've had lots of ups and downs, and there's been times when I've been coach of the year a few times, and I've been wanted to be kicked out of town a few times. And so I got a head job when I was 27, and it was not, no one's ever really prepared for everything that comes with it, but I was very ill-equipped, didn't have a lot of mentors around, had a few. And so I had to learn the hard way on a lot of things. So to me, I just said, I want to write a book almost back to me, when I was 27, what would have helped me along the way, and what are some things that I've got to work on. And it was a great process for me. I hope other people maybe get something from it, but really it was just kind of a great way for me to express, some of the things I've learned along the way, and maybe it can help some other coaches.
Coach, that's interesting. I was 27 as well when I got my first head football coach job, and I look back now going, holy smokes, I wish I had another shot, to do that all over again, because I know at 27 years old, I know I made a lot of mistakes. Certainly wasn't ready, at that time. But 11 chapters, real brief here. He writes an introduction. Then he writes about getting the job. That's a new chapter. Next chapter, I got the job. Now what? The next chapter, sharing the vision. And then growing your program. New chapter, decide, delegate, depart. New chapter, there is no off season. Ain't that the truth? Especially these days. Next chapter is building a staff. And then he has X's and O's or Jacks and Joes. And then his last chapter, well, before the conclusion is the last chapter, but then mistakes I've made. So 11 chapters. Coach, I thought it was a really, really good read, a pretty quick read, took a lot of notes as I'm reading through there. And so again, guys, you can find this book, Find a Way, What I'd Wish I'd Known When I Became a Head Football Coach. You can find that on Amazon. You can find that on 8laces.org. Coach, we're going to talk through 10 questions here, some of them having to do with the book, some of them just, two guys talking football here. But which was your favorite chapter to write?
Probably my favorite one was the decide, delegate, and depart. And for a couple reasons. One, my father's a great man, a military guy, and I learned a lot from him. And he actually used to tell me that as a joke, the 3 Ds of leadership: decide, delegate, depart. But I really thought about it for a while when I was writing the book. And that was an area, man, I really struggled with. Was I wanted to do everything myself so it was done right, or I didn't do a great job of explaining what I wanted to other people, and then I'd get frustrated with them. But learning how to deal with other people and learning how to recognize what they're good at, explain what you want them to do clearly, and communicate well was something that I really had to learn as a leader. And I think most great leaders in any field really understand that they're not the smartest at every single thing in their profession. But they're really good at finding people that are good and accentuating their strengths. And I think as I've learned that, it's helped me a lot as a coach, is find out what people around you are great at, tell them what you expect them to do, and then allow them to do it. And that was something that was tough for me as a young coach.
Yeah. Why do you think we do that as head coaches, where we want to micromanage and we don't want to delegate, Coach? What do you think leads us into that?
There's a couple things. I think fear of failure. If I fail, I want it to be me, not me giving it to somebody else. There's a fear of letting go to somebody else.
Yeah.
A lot of times I don't communicate very well my expectations, so it's not done as well as I wanted it to do. And then the other part, I think a lot of times, I've got a 12-year-old son now, so we're in the stage where we're teaching him how to mow the grass and how to do different chores. It's a lot easier to shove him out of the way and do it myself. And it gets done quicker. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of times just carry that over into coaching. It's harder sometimes to allow a guy in like a JV football game, let him call the plays and fail. It's hard to watch that, but that's how coaches have to learn. And the longer I've gone, I've kind of transitioned more into mentoring my assistants. It's become easier for me, but it was tough at first, just to let go.
Yeah, Coach, I've moved into being an administrator the last 2 football seasons here. It's a job I love, but and we've got a dynamite head coach, right now this year. And but I sit there sometimes, especially more at our JV games, where our head coach does a great job of being real hands off and letting those guys, coach and do their thing. And I'm sitting down there, standing with him in the corner sideline kind of thing, watching the JV games. Always wanting to give some input, and step in. And
yep.
But it's like you said it perfectly. Let them fail. Let them do their job and grow through that. Coach, in the introduction, you said something. I loved this sentence and this whole concept and idea. You said you have an addiction for building football programs from non-competitive to winners. What's your favorite turnaround story you've done? Because that's something I love being able to do too. I've been 6 different schools out of 18 years. You've been, I think, to 3 in about 17, 18 years. So what's your favorite turnaround story in your experience as a coach?
I would say probably my first year at Southside. They had been struggling. They'd only had football 5 years. I believe they'd only had 8 wins in 5 years, and none of those wins were in the last 2 years. So
wow.
I was inheriting a group of kids that had never won a high school football game. And so watching them work so hard during the summer, I was continually amazed because I was expecting I'm going to have to fight attendance issues or work ethic issues, and I realized that, man, these kids, if they've stuck through 2 0-10s, there's nothing I can't ask them to do they won't do. That kind of character you have as a kid to do that speaks volumes. And so, remember winning our first game, and players were crying, the parents were crying. I think the administration was even tearing up a little bit just because these kids had worked so hard to be successful. That was there's some games that, you mark in your top whatever list, and that one will forever be burned for me in my top 3 or 4 games I've ever coached. And it really wasn't even a competitive game. We didn't even play very well, but we won, and just watching their reaction was awesome.
Coach, what is it about those kids, do you think, that made them stay through that? I mean, that's, was that just a unique part of the community or the school? Because, going 0-20 or 0-30 is not a very fun thing to do.
No, it's not. I think the fact that football was new and they didn't know other things. In some programs where you maybe have had success and then you don't have success, that's much tougher, I would assume, than dealing with. The first school I was at was that way. But this school, they had never known anything but losing. They didn't know how to win.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't an effort issue. It was just we got to learn some of these little nuances of the game so that we can be competitive and win some games.
And, Coach, third question here. What do you consider the one single most important aspect in turning a program around from being non-competitive to competitive?
There's a lot, but I would say one is getting the effort level to a level that you expect as a coach. I think a lot of times kids will give what they think is 100% effort, and they don't quite realize that's not it. It's got to be another level of that. And the only way they're going to do that is if they respect you, they care for you as a coach. They don't have to like you all the time, but they do need to respect you, and you need to respect them. And I love my players, and I tell them I love them so much, I'm not going to settle for less. And so getting them to compete at such a high level, from that point, you can teach football. But it's harder to get kids to play with 100% effort at all times in practice and in the film room and in the weight room and all those things. To me, if you can get that there, you can teach football.
Coach, you've been around it a long time. Do you think kids have changed in that way?
Maybe. I think every kid wants to succeed. I think that there's times that we do kids a disservice at very young ages by allowing their natural ability to let them slide on issues like discipline or effort or whatever it is. And so sometimes you may inherit one of those 14-year-olds who's been dominant his whole life that just doesn't know how to handle failure. And so I do think that part of sports has changed, mainly due to youth sports.
Yeah.
They're playing at a young level, having such success, and you're having to deal with that now, where usually you would get them in junior high and senior high, they really hadn't played competitively, and so you're dealing now with just you're teaching them instead of having to break bad habits.
That's that breaking bad habits thing becomes a big headache for sure. Coach, you took over, you talked about this a little bit here, but on this topic, you took over a program with a 23-game losing streak. That's a long streak. What was the most challenging part of that job?
Well, it was hard to watch our kids get made fun of around the area because we hadn't been successful, and to hear people talk negative about them instead of just it's high school sports. These are 16, 17-year-old kids, and it was frustrating for me to watch adults and other coaches or other people just kind of belittle them. These are kids, whether they're good at football or not doesn't matter in my mind.
Yeah.
And so that was frustrating. And getting them to understand that you're worth more than just whatever you can produce, but that you can do more than you expect. I think that was the hardest part of it was, and that first year, we only won 4 games. We actually had a chance to make the playoffs there at the end and didn't quite do it, but we were able to get them to understand we can compete. It doesn't matter if they're bigger and stronger and faster. It doesn't matter if they've had football for however long and they've always beat you. All that matters is what we're going to do right now. And so that was the toughest part, I think, was getting them to believe, we can do this.
Yeah.
And showing them a minor victories. Here's how we're going to do it, which I think requires you being open and honest with your kids. This guy's bigger, stronger, and faster, so how are we going to beat him? How are we going to trick him? How are we going to do this to him? And showing them a realistic path to success instead of just saying we're just going to pound them into the ground and they look at that kid and they know that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to overcome our obstacles?
Coach, I took over a program that was 2-18, 0-10 the year before I got there. One of the biggest frustrations and challenges for me there was kids not wanting to fall in line, right? With, like, for instance, just lifting weights.
Right.
Had the age old. This was down, South Orange County, which here in, Southern California, a very, very rich area. A lot of kids have their own personal trainers, and at the time, kettlebells were the big thing. And so these 2 kids, they come in and see me the second day I was there on campus, and hey, Coach, we don't lift with football team. We don't do it. And both of these kids are very good athletes. One of them was a 3-sport athlete, one of them 2-sport athlete, very influential parents. And so now I'm tested with, okay, how am I going to handle this on my second day there? I told them, if you don't lift weights with us, that's a fine choice for you to make. You can do with your body what you want to do, but if you don't lift weights with us, you're not going to play football. And that was a frustrating thing to work through for 2 days. A lot of meetings and energy expounded, but at the end of the day, their butts were in lifting with us. And did you face any cultural issues like that where you had to, make a stand? And if so, how did you get through it?
That's a good question. I think I've had to put 1 or 2 kids off a team before for different issues. I don't know if it's the same issues as what you described there, but generally it does come back to I can work with a lot of things as a coach. I can work with you making all kinds of mistakes as long as you're honest and we're working together. But the minute that you're not willing to show respect to the authorities that are there, whether it be me or the admin or whatever it is, that's usually where I have to cut a kid loose. At Southside, I'd say it's a poorer area, and so we don't have those specific types of issues, but you do have the issue with, we're all going to wear these colors to lift and you're not. Well, how am I going to deal with that? And see those minor issues that have to be dealt with and handled well. And early in my career, I would have overlooked it for the talent. And as I've gotten older, I've recognized that that's not the way to do it.
Yeah. No, you're right. I see a lot of young guys make that same mistake, where they do. They don't want to lose a kid because of their ability, but at the end of the day, they end up, wrecking things, and then the coach, regrets letting them stay. For sure, that's an issue. Coach, one of the things you said here in one of the chapters was love your players. Loving your players must be at the top of the reasons you coach. And so we hear a lot of coaches, say things like that. And then some of them we can believe. And then, more so at the collegiate level, we'll see and hear coaches say things like that. But then we'll see and hear things that are, it ain't happening like that,
Correct.
in their program. Yeah. So how have you, maybe just this past season, can you share some ways that you practically carry out that philosophy of loving your players?
Sure. And I'll start off saying there will never be one program I can give someone to make them genuine about their feelings for their players. But here are a few things that we do in our program that I think show kids we care about them as more than what they can do for me on the field. One, I'm not naturally a hugger, but I try to hug my kids. I try to hug the football kids and let them know I care about them. Slap on the back, make sure there's something about physical contact where you are supporting a kid. Two, we do a lot of off-the-field activities that involve not just players, but sometimes also parents. We do a father-son retreat. We do a mother-son date night. We do a lot of things where we'll invite the players over to our house. We did a pancake dinner for the linemen, and my wife cooked for them. We did a big brother, little brother dinner and brought them over. My defensive coordinator had his defense over. So we want to show them, hey, look, off the field, we care for you for more than just what happens here. We've done a few other things in that realm, but basically it's the idea these kids understand you care for them, not for what they can do for you, but you care for them because of who they are and you want to help them. And I think that's a very different mentality. I don't want a kid leaving and we tell them all the time, I tell them all the time, we don't set goals on wins. I don't care. I don't care what the scoreboard says. I care that we're growing and doing the best that we can do. Generally, the wins do take care of themselves, but we never want that to be an indicator of success in our program.
How have those kids in your program, how have they taken to that mentality, that, the hug? I love the affection part of it you're talking about. I think so many kids these days missing a father at home, and I don't know what it's like, in your community there, but
yeah, same place.
Yeah, they need that. They need that kind of touch.
They do. I think they do, and I'll let you know, I'm not natural at that. Like I'm not a natural sensitive. That's just not who I am. But that's what these kids, I think, need. And that doesn't mean I've got to be soft on them and not discipline. I've disciplined the snot out of my kids, my own children. They watch me spank my 12-year-old son and then walk back on the field and coach. So they know that has nothing to do with discipline, but that I care for you beyond things. And so I've tried to make that something that I do. We try to make that it's constantly done, even after a hard meeting. I'll meet with a kid and have to chew him out for something he did wrong, and here's your punishment. Here's how we're going to deal with that. All right, come here, give me a hug. All right, we're going to do this. We're going to move on. And it's not going to hold this against you, but we are going to serve whatever this punishment is. And I think that lets someone, just like you would do with your own children. You're going to do something to help them. You have to love kids to discipline them, I think.
Absolutely, love it, Coach. You said another great quote here from the book I liked. You said, there are hundreds of ways to coach a team and be successful at it. From Dick Vermeil's tears and emotion to Nick Saban's glare. Man, I love the way you put that. Certainly there are a bunch of ways to skin a cat. What kind of coach do you think you are? What would your players consider you to be on that scale, on that spectrum?
Man, I don't know. I really don't. You'd have to ask them. My favorite coach to watch now is Dabo Swinney. I think he does a great job of getting his guys. They care about him, they love him, and they play disciplined football. And I don't know if that's who I am, but that's who I would aspire to be.
Yeah. I think there's a balance, like you said there, the difference between Dick Vermeil's tears and emotion, where you got a guy who loves his players, who cares deeply for his players, and a guy like Nick. Not saying Coach Saban doesn't care deeply for his players, but there's definitely two different ways to carry yourself, and I definitely think there's a good balance, between those two things. I know when I became a head coach at 27, I had been their JV coach for 2 years, and as a JV head coach, you're kind of more along the lines of that, you're kind of their buddy, and
yep.
That was a tough transition for me because I went from being, like I said, the JV head coach, the varsity head coach, and in my immaturity, I felt a little bit like I had to change, like, hey, I got to be a little harder now. And I made some mistakes there. A couple of my players I was very close to, because I started at that school with this freshman class, and I taught a lot of them in the classroom, and they came to me like my second week of being a head coach at the varsity level and said, Coach, you've changed, man. We don't like it, And so I made some big mistakes there, trying to go, too hard towards that Nick Saban glare that you're talking about here. So that is a tough balance.
It is. I think just being genuine, just be who you are, and I think that'll naturally happen.
Yeah, there you go. That's well said. Absolutely. So we talked a little bit. We both became head coaches at 27. I know looking back, I wasn't ready. I thought I was then. I talk to a lot of guys, as a consultant on the job search process, guys who have coached maybe for 2 years who are, hey, I want to go be a head football coach now all of a sudden. And I know they're not ready. They haven't been a coordinator, they haven't even coordinated anything. And they think they're going to go be a head football coach. What would you say? How do you answer that? How do you know if you're ready to be a head coach, or can you?
Well, I don't think you're ever 100. I'm still not ready for whatever next year's got in store for me. But I think that, if a young guy's asking, hey, am I ready? Then I would ask him, are you ready to fire a coach if you have to? Are you ready to kick a kid off the team and that's going to be bad for him in the long run, but it's good for your team? Are you ready to have hard conversations? Are you ready to lose friends? Because, are you ready for these tough things that come with being a head coach? And if you think, I think a lot of times when I took the job at 27, I didn't know all that was coming.
Yeah.
And that's something I've had to learn, and it's part of the job. It's just what it is. And I think a lot of guys are either great with kids, and that's awesome, or they're great on a whiteboard. That's also awesome. But that's a very small part of the job of being a head football coach at a relatively large school.
Coach, so great points there about some of the tough parts of being a head coach. You mentioned having to fire a guy or having to remove a kid from a team. I remember the first time I had to do each of those things.
Not very fun.
Not fun, yeah. What do you consider to be the most challenging part, or your least favorite part of being a head coach?
I think it's a very lonely position. I think a lot of people don't quite understand that, when you're an assistant coach, y'all are all buddies.
Yeah.
I was there. I know what that's like.
Yep.
And then the head coach walks in and it gets quiet. That's just how it is.
Yep.
And it's just like probably being an administrator. You're in that role now. I would think when you take any leadership role, there is a separation from the people that you work with. And so while you can still have a good relationship with them, when you're in that role as a football coach, then it's different. And I think a lot of guys don't understand it until they experience it.
That's a good way to put it. It becomes different. You do, because you're one of one on your campus, and
right.
It does become a challenge. Do you remember the first time you had to fire a coach?
I do, and those are not fun things to do. And I remember having to move guys to different spots on the staff, because depending on what state you're in, some of them you can't get rid of anybody, so you have to just kind of move them somewhere or do something else with. And
yeah,
it's a lot of tough stuff to deal with. And I tell you what, as a young head coach, I didn't do a good job managing my staff, and then I'd get so upset with them. And now looking back, I'm like, I did such a bad job of giving them the tools to be successful that really that was probably a lot on me.
Interesting. Coach, what in terms of where you would get frustrated with them, do you remember in those, because it's been a little while, what kind of things happened where you were frustrated with them and then you saw that just as your downfall, your failure?
Well, I think my first year as head coach, I had come up as a defensive coordinator, and so I wanted to just coach defense and handle program type stuff, and I didn't pay attention to the offense at all. And then during a game, I'd get mad about something. Well, man, I should have been dealing with that in a staff meeting or with them on Monday when the game plan was going in, instead of just completely saying, all right, you guys have it. And then if I do that, I can't get frustrated on Friday night if it didn't go how I wanted, because I wasn't ready for that. Or the same thing with other position coaches, let them have their position, but not be involved and not give them an expectation. A lot of times when you're a head coach, you have a couple assumptions. Like, you assume people see things the way you do, and you assume people are going to work as hard as you're going to work because they're as passionate as you are. And that's not always the case. There's a reason you're a head coach and other people are assistant coaches. And some of that is because that's not their lifelong dream. And so you have to understand how to work with those kind of people.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a good follow-up to that, but you said it right. Working with those types can be difficult sometimes. Do you think, Coach, that you have to be a coordinator before you can be a head coach?
I would think it would depend on the school size. If you're going to a place you can hire an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator, then no, I don't think you have to. I mean, you can look at who's the Steelers head coach now, Tomlin. Never been a coordinator. I think he's a great head coach. But he's in a position where all he has to do is program management. Yeah. If you're going to a high school, generally you have to coach a position or a side of the ball unless you're moving way up. I think it does help to be a coordinator, but I don't think it would be that you have to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I never knew Tomlin was not a coordinator. That's very interesting. Coach, well, question number 8 here. Working with parents. You said in one of your chapters, the second type of communication is weekly emails. I send these out Sunday night or Monday morning with several items included. You kind of talk through, all those things you include. I did the same thing. I forget. I think we were the Eagles. I think I called it the Eagle Eye newsletter. It went out every Monday.
Nice.
Kind of, laid out, hey, we're dressed, what practices look like, what we're dressing in, where the pregame meal is Thursday night. Is there a cost associated with that? Is that that's the type of email you would send out to your parents, right?
Yeah, very similar. And I think it's a good thing to do. I think you can never over communicate with parents. And now that I am a parent of a kid who's starting to come through, I see that as that's why those parents would get so frustrated when I would change a practice schedule the day before or 2 days before. And so I think whenever you over communicate, you don't eliminate every issue you're going to get, because you never will. I mean, ultimately, every parent wants their kid to play, and there's no way you can avoid that. But you can avoid a lot of the other issues that coaches dig themselves, that kind of hole that you dig yourself into, if you've communicated up front and taken care of things up front. And I think it helps a lot with parents that you do off the field stuff with parents, you communicate with parents, and then they still may be frustrated with you, but I think they at least have less ground to stand on.
Great way to put it. Less ground to stand on. I recommended that. I was kind of helping to mentor a brand new head coach last year, and he stopped sending out those weekly emails because he said it created more communication than was what was necessary. Like, I guess parents were responding to those emails, more frequently than what he wanted. I never faced that. Did you ever face that where they would respond to your, those weekly update communications, and that become a little bit of a headache for you?
No, I mean, I've had a few parents that maybe were a little overzealous and wanting to be active, but I've never had an issue with that. Most parents, not every parent, but most parents do come from good intentions. And I think sometimes as head coach, we see ourselves as against each other instead of trying to work together for the benefit of that kid.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a good way to see it. I told one of the mistakes he made, Coach, and I told him about this beforehand. I don't know how you send them out, but I told him, make sure you send them out as a blind carbon copy,
Yep,
and
exactly.
The first one he sent out was not a BCC. It was, all the parents were in the 2, and then it started this big old long chain of, some parents who were frustrated with things. So I thought, man, that was your first mistake right there, Coach. So the next week he was sure to BCC that. Coach, in the chapter you wrote called "I Got the Job, Now What," which again I think was a lot of times, like you said, we're out on this island, right, as a head coach, and it's not like you can go to the classroom next door and get advice on something, when you're a teacher. So I thought that was a good chapter too, to give a little bit of a blueprint. I put together something called, it's on my website, coach4.org, called Your First 30 Days as a Head Coach, a list of
that looks awesome.
Yeah, a list of like 12 things you should be doing. You say, be ready to be questioned about what you're going to do, especially from the former staff if you keep any. And they deserve to know the reason behind what you're doing. Don't accept constant questioning, but be open with them behind closed doors. Again, an exceptional point. Talk to me a little bit about those staff transition that you've managed, Coach, and how have those been for you? I know it's Well, I'll talk real quick before, my experience when I became a head coach the first time, that was a group of guys I had coached with for 2 years, loved every one of them, kept every one of them on board. I think there was 8 or 9 of them, and everyone except for one was, gung-ho, encouraging me to apply, in my corner to get that job. And so that was a real easy transition for me. The next school I went to as the head coach, the transition did not go as well, with my assistants there. So talk to me a little bit about that staff transition when you take over as a head coach.
Yeah. Well, I've coached in 2 different states, in Alabama and in Arkansas. And in both of them, especially when you get into public schools, which I am in Arkansas, it's really hard to remove other coaches. So you kind of have to have your theory going in. You can either intentionally try to run people off, or you can get them to buy into what you're doing. I've always attempted to try to get people to buy into what we're doing. I think that's just a better way to do it. And then if you get to a point where this guy clearly is not going to work out, you can reassign him or move him somewhere else. And so coming to Southside, I was very blessed. I think there were some pretty sharp guys on the staff, a lot of new, it's a 5-year program. So a lot of guys that were just new to football, hard workers, good character guys, didn't understand a lot about football at that point because they were just learning. But I've always had the policy, guys, we get behind closed doors. I want to hear your opinion. I don't want a staff of 1. I want a staff of however many coaches we have. But as soon as I make a decision, don't take it personal. We're going to go out and we're going to be together. And a lot of times I've taken suggestions. There's a lot of really smart guys in the room. I try to do a good job of hiring smart coaches. Yeah. And so I'll take this guy's opinion or that guy's opinion or that guy's opinion, and I've got to make a choice. And I think the staffs that have been the best for me have been the ones that we've fought and argued. It's usually about personnel. That's usually what we end up fighting over the most. But once I've made a decision and we move forward from it, it's been good. And I think people are willing to be on your side if they understand that you're at least listening to what they think. I think that has helped. It doesn't always help, and nothing's 100%. But I think when people understand that I'm not here to rule over you like a king, I've got to make choices because I'll be the one they fire if it doesn't go well. But I want you here. I want to hear your opinion. That's why I hired you and brought you in, or that's why I've allowed you to stay on my staff.
So, Coach, you saying in those states that you mentioned, you don't have the discretion as the head coach about their coaching job or their teaching job, or both?
Teaching job. I can in Arkansas, the way it basically works is I can pick who I want on my staff, but to hire another coach would require a teaching position.
Yes.
So it's a little more limited as far as I don't have to have a guy on my staff that we disagree with. I can remove them, but doesn't mean I can replace them.
Yeah, because he's going to still be teaching in the building, right?
Correct.
Yeah. We have that here in California as well. The union is very strong out here, so becomes a lot more difficult than in some states that I've heard of for sure. That does create a unique challenge. Have you had any? I love the concept also. Hey, behind closed doors we can fight and argue, and we've had some of those interesting Sunday meetings where you have had to fight and argue, yep. be it philosophy on how to do something or X and O's. Have you had any of those ever where, you thought it was all done and you found out those assistants were still talking and stuff wasn't really resolved?
I had a few where I think we've come to a conclusion we're going to do something, and then I looked at it on the practice field to kind of look down and saw it wasn't being done how I wanted it done. And I've always told my coaches, look, I don't want to embarrass you in front of your kids, so I'll do the best I can not to do that, but I'm not going to allow them to be taught wrong. And so, they've had a few of those discussions, which try to keep them private. But, we're at some point people have to realize you're the man, you're the guy. And so you don't want to completely undercut a coach's authority. So I'll call them in the first time and then have a discussion with them about, I get that that's what you would like to do, but you're working for me, and here's how we're going to do it. And if it can't be rectified from that, then you would go about the process of removing them. At least I would.
I really like the way you just said that. You don't want to correct them. You don't want to, correct the coach in front of the kids, but you also don't want your kids to be taught wrong. I love it. How do you handle that as a head coach? Coach, if a guy's, teaching a technique the wrong way or not doing a good enough job teaching that technique, will you step in right then and there, or will you, hey, get a quick drink of water, kids, and then correct the coach?
It. Yep.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Generally, we usually have an impromptu water break usually,
there
right, Dan?
Yep.
And then a quick discussion of here's what I want done.
Yeah.
And then generally the next day at practice, I'll end up down in that position group watching, letting the coach and make sure he's doing it right.
Yeah.
It's his group, but I'm down there.
Yeah.
And then from then, usually the problem is rectified. Most coaches I've been around, they want to be successful. They want to do well. Every now and then you may have one that's defiant, but usually those are guys I'm going to get rid of pretty quickly or not hire them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. I think that, working with parents, working with assistants, working with administrators, those can be three big headaches that coaches just don't think through. And the way you've said it, I think you want to be a head coach. Okay. Do you really want to fire a guy? Do you really want to remove a kid from a team? Do you really want to have that meeting with the superintendent? Really good ways to think about it. Coach, last question here as we wrap things up again with Coach Kenny Simpson. You can follow him on Twitter at FB as in football, at FB Coach Simpson. We're talking a lot about just different parts of being a head coach, and a lot of this stuff I stole from his book here as talking points. Find a way, what I wish I'd known when I became a head football coach. Get that on Amazon or 8 Laces. Coach, in the chapter Mistakes I've Made, it's the last chapter before the conclusion. You said something I really loved. What you allow to slide, you accept. What's an example of something that you allowed to slide that eventually kind of hurt the team?
Man, I could have wrote an entire book on mistakes I've made, but then nobody would hire me. So I just kept it to one chapter.
There you go.
Probably one of the most vivid ones, I think I might have wrote about in the book, but one of the most vivid ones is my second or third year, my second year maybe, we had a lot of kids that were, I'll put in quotation marks, hurt on Monday and Tuesday, and started getting a little better on Wednesday, and they were good to go Thursday, and they were really talented. So, of course, they played on Friday. And then we would kind of wash, rinse, and repeat the next week and the next week. And we had a good year that year. We made the playoffs first. It was a great year as far as record, but it infected the team to where that list started to grow, where my offensive line coach is good friends with me now, but he called it Miracle Thursdays, where Thursday everybody got healthy and we were good to go. And I tried to justify it as much as I could with all you got to get your race horses to the whatever it was. But the reality was I didn't want to have to step in and handle that. I didn't want to sit a kid. We were starting to win. I was young as a head coach, and I thought that I could keep the job by continuing to win, and that's all that mattered. And so I allowed all that to go. The next year, same issues. We're not as good, completely infected the team. I had lost a lot of the culture I was trying to build. I did not do as well that year. So I think that's a small example. I do think as a parent, I've learned you need to pick battles. So like there's some battles as a coach that I think you need to pick, and some battles you don't. So I'm not as over the top, anal retentive maybe as some coaches are, but the battles I do pick, that are what I consider vital to our culture, but I am going to be careful on those and be intentional on those, and understand that, if you allow a dirty locker room, or if you allow a dirty weight room, or if you allow whatever it is, you are accepting that. You're not just ignoring it. You're accepting it, and that's become part of who you are.
Awesome. Coach, I thought those Miracle Thursdays just happened in my programs.
Well, I learned a quick fix to that was ice bath Monday. So if you can't practice Monday, you're in the ice bath, and
Nice.
the ice bath's good for you. And it usually took care of our minor injuries. Were pretty quickly rectified.
Outstanding. Coach, this has been fun. Again, follow Coach Simpson on Twitter at FB Coach Simpson. Any other ways, Coach, they can reach you?
Yeah, my email, I think, is on my Twitter account. It's kenny.simpson@southsideschools.org. Just reach out, man. I love talking football, and I really have got to the point now where I'm looking back at these younger coaches and excited about what they can do. There's some super great young coaches, and I love seeing what they're trying to do with our game.
Coach, quite an accomplishment. Congratulations on writing this book. I know you've got some more ideas out there. There's a lot of one thing you'll find, Coach, here is a lot of guys will come and ask you, or they'll have some really good ideas on writing a book, and then, they just never follow through. It's an extremely, extremely difficult thing to do for a lot of people. So congratulations on that.
I appreciate it, man. It definitely helped me, and maybe it'll help a couple other guys.
What are some other works you have in the pipeline, Coach? I can't remember some of the titles, but I saw you tweet recently on some other books you're thinking about writing.
I've got one actually almost done, which is crazy because this one took forever, and then they just kind of started working out. The next one I've got, I'm trying to work on the title, but I think it's going to be Coaching Football Through the Eyes of a Basketball Coach.
Oh, wow.
And it talks about, I grew up as a basketball player and coached it for a couple of years, and so it talks about concepts. I kind of got the idea from my daughter. She's 14, and my son is 12. They both play basketball, and the difference in her and him is amazing. Like, she was taught in basketball to run a play, so if they run a play and the girl's not open, she throws the ball there anyway, because that's what's on the whiteboard. You do that. Or my son plays basketball, and he understands, that wasn't there, I'm just going to go to the rim and make a layup. And so that's where I got the concept from, was teaching concepts to kids, not just plays. And so kind of from there it builds and goes. It'll be a good one. I'm probably going to finish it up here over the off season and release it later. But that one I'm excited about. I've got a few other options that I may do after that. And it's crazy because, if I had told myself back then I would write a book, I'd have laughed. I was a guy that hated English class and hated writing. And now I've started to kind of find it therapeutic almost.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is. It's a fun thing. I really enjoy writing as well. So, that sounds like an intriguing book, Coach. Good luck with that. And again, you can find his book on Amazon or my website 8laces.org. It's called Find a Way: What I Wish I'd Known When I Became a Head Football Coach. And I think even those, I've coached 17 years of football myself, 8 of those as a head coach. This is a book that even guys who have been a head coach for a decade will pull some things out of. So it's not just for the guy, thinking about becoming a head coach. So pick it up and enjoy that book. Again, follow Coach Simpson on Twitter at FB Coach Simpson. Coach, Happy New Year. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.